because the economies in North Asia are actually conduits for products that go through in terms of raw commodities production, then obviously through to Europe and North America. And that's something that I think needs to be massaged through. And you know, we watch Bloomberg, we watch, you know, we obviously see some of the Today Show on media and so forth. And I think the most important thing is that the government needs to get ahead of that. It's great that we have the commodities. It's great that we've got or should I say Australia's got a great dairy industry, which is actually one of the largest suppliers after New Zealand to Taiwan, dairy products. But the most important thing is what happens if that is taken away. Are we left with a hollow economy? Yeah. How do we become competitive within this region? And I think that's the thing that concerns me the most, because what you have then is not cyclical unemployment, you have structural unemployment. They'll
fall back on tourism and service industries, but that's like falling back on a windmill when you're used to a coal-fired generator.
Absolutely. And I'm not quite sure that the current government, the Labor government, is competent enough to at least to deal with those issues. I'm not obviously speaking from a political biasness. You know, I've been a swinging voter. A lot of my colleagues here in Asia, we've been Australian citizens. We do want to come home to Australia one day, but obviously we've been seconded out here, and we do have, you know, we want to reduce our mortgages in Australia and come back and live in our homes. That's extremely important.
Well, Hong Kong is a wonderful place, but there's not a lot of space there, is it?
There's not a lot.
If all the cars hit the roads at once back in the 80s, there would be no road uncovered by cars, they said.
That is true. I mean, it's definitely changed since then. I mean, Hong Kong today is a fairly vibrant but highly polluted city.
Yeah.
It's extremely efficient, both from an expatriate point of view and also a local community. There is a very laissez-faire sort of robust economy.
I was going to ask you about the freedom. Do you know you're living under a communist government or not?
Well, you would not think that'd be the case. I think what expatriates sort of feel in Hong Kong is that we're sort of immune from that sort of watchful eye of the communist regime, because the word communism in Hong Kong is somewhat clouded with the fact that it's fairly much the golden goose, so to speak, and Hong Kong, should I say, China does not want to tamper with that. Look, I've lived in Indonesia for 6 years, Singapore for 7, and, you know, for the better part of the last decade in Hong Kong. And dare I say, they will not tamper with the economy. What I do think, though, is that, and as you've mentioned many times on your program, Brian, is that the Chinese are very strategic in terms of their thinking. Yeah. They do think ahead.
And I'm hoping that they are not inside the clutches of the Goldman Sachs of the world. They can see the Rothschilds coming, can't they?
Well, they can see that. I think we're dealing with a different social and political and economic sort of entity here when it comes to the Chinese. I mean, obviously, you know, you've obviously seen what's happened to Greece, and obviously Goldman Sachs' name has been flaunted there and so forth. And it takes two hands to clap. And when once sovereigns realise that, you know, they need some sort of financing.
Well, in my case, it's often one hand of my forehead.
Well, exactly. I mean, the thing right now is that the U.S. Treasury market, over 75% is supported by the PBOC, which is the People's Republic of China. Oh, yeah. They are actually holding more treasuries than any other sovereign wealth nation. So, in effect, their hands are bound as well.
They don't want America to go bust then.
They don't. They want to keep buying the Chinese products until they work through the export consumption phase to become domestic consumption.
And when China, for instance, starts building really good cars, and they've only just started building cars, this is going to be devastating for Japan and Korea, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think Japan's already in a spot of trouble altogether. I mean, if their currency is extremely strong against the U.S., unwillingly so. They've been in a debt spiral for over the last 20 years. They have had 0% interest rates for a good part of 15 years, and they still haven't managed to at least get business to value. And the currency is getting stronger. Why is that? Because once the world has become more global in terms of its economic free trade, then there are other whims and woes. In other words, other sovereign wealth nations can print their currency and at least become competitive. It's a race about who can be competitive in terms of their products. Now, the emerging markets, Brazil, India, Southeast Asia, and I guess other parts of the world, were once touted as being enough to pick up the slack as both the US and Europe go through their downslide. But that's clearly becoming an issue.
Brazil has just overtaken Britain in the size of its economy.
It has. Again, when you say it has taken its size over its economy, don't forget what we're discussing right now is also a couple of things. Relative to what? Relative to the currency, and where the currency is now relative to where it was 10 years ago and vice versa, is extremely complex. So when someone says, well, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, in terms of its assets on its balance sheet, is big enough now to buy Citibank probably 1.5 times over, that's because the US dollar is almost halved against the Australian dollar. Not necessarily. So we need to be fairly clear about here what we're talking. It's more in terms of the relative terms. But optically, the media sometimes tend to portray and tends to go, and again, not only the media, but the politicians tend to sort of pick and choose what they want to sort of like skew in terms of their agenda. But the main reason for my call, Brian, is just that, is that I feel that the Australian politicians are taking their eye off the ball, and there is a huge tsunami potentially happening in terms of what's going on globally. Unless the monetary policy stimulus in the US and obviously the EU get traction, then it could come over to Australia. And if China doesn't continue to pick up the slack and hopefully be fast enough in terms of turning around to become domestically consumed sort of driven economy, and we could have a bit of an issue. And I'm not sure whether the Australian politicians are sort of focusing too much on that. And
I think you're right. There's no plan B. They're still working on plan A, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues. And, as I mentioned earlier, there's a large community of expatriates who, I mean, we're here to work, but let me tell you, every day there's not one Australian that I speak to in my office or other offices throughout Hong Kong and Southeast Asia who doesn't look at the Australian newspaper or listen to Australian radio in the last 10 years to see what's going on. It's just, we just hope one day that, no wonder so many people look to take their lives to come to Australia. It's still a wonderful place. It's just...
it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, at the moment anyway. Let's hope it stays that way, and when you guys come back to your homes, you won't be disappointed with what we've done with it.
No, exactly, and then hopefully, I mean, by and large, it's still a wonderful place. I mean, I've lived in some great locations throughout Southeast Asia, but if no one in Southeast Asia talks about their home in Southeast Asia, Australians talk about their home in Australia.
Yeah, good one. Well, nice to talk to you, Peter. Nice to talk to you, Peter. Nice to talk to you,